This week on Jerusalem Dateline, widening the war on ISIS. An international coalition, including Arab nations, begin a campaign of bombing critical targets in Syria. Plus,
ISIL is not Islamic. No religion condones the killing of innocents. And the vast majority of ISIL's victims have been Muslim.
They are following Islam's Prophet Muhammad in every detail.
Former Muslims push back against President Obama's statements about ISIS and Islam. And lessons from Lebanon. In the 1980s, the U.S. intervened in that country's civil war. We're still seeing the impact today. Hello and welcome to this edition of Jerusalem Dateline. I'm Chris Mitchell. The United States, along with 5 Arab nations, participated in aerial attacks on ISIS and a relatively unknown terror group planning attacks on the U.S. It could mark the beginning of another long campaign against radical Islam in Syria and Iraq. President Obama met with the representatives at a United Nations meeting.
Well, it is a wonderful opportunity for me to welcome these leaders, friends, partners from the region, and to say thank you to all of them for their participation and commitment to rolling back the violent extremism that has so disrupted Iraq and Syria and threatens the region as a whole.
The Pentagon briefed Israeli officials before the attacks and said their initial assessments indicated the strikes were successful. The targets included the Islamic State and a less well-known group of al-Qaeda veterans called Khorasan, near the Syrian city of Aleppo. The Pentagon said the group was planning attacks against U.S. airplanes.
We've been watching this group closely for some time. We believe the Khorasan group was nearing the execution phase of an attack either in Europe or the homeland. We know that the Khorasan group has attempted to recruit Westerners to serve as operatives or to infiltrate back into their homelands.
Some Republicans supported the attacks, but do have concerns about the coalition.
Even though these allies really play both sides, because there have been a lot of reports about Qatar especially financing ISIL, and Qatar is the home of Al Jazeera that's always broadcasting very anti-American and interviews, and that's their focus. So at least they're protecting both sides. I'm not in favor of that. They should be solidly with us. But hats off to them for participating. All of these countries have a lot at stake if this terrorist group keeps expanding. So I support the president. I wish that we had started it earlier.
Ross Leitonen added that the fight against terrorism is the new normal. In the meantime, an estimated 140,000 Kurdish refugees have fled into Turkey after another onslaught by the Islamic State.
The war is going now. IS is attacking Kurdish villages. We were in a village and we went to the next village, they attacked it. We went to another village and they attacked it too. Then we went to the city. The people in the city fled too. They said they are heading to Kobani. After that, we came to the border and passed over here.
These refugees are some of the latest victims of the Islamic State. Now that an air campaign has begun, many in the region hope it will help roll back the scourge of this barbaric group. When ISIS burst onto the scene this summer, it caught many by surprise, but not Jay Sekulow of the American Center for Law and Justice. His team recognized the threat months before the terrorist army conquered large parts of Iraq. He told CBN's Ephraim Graham about the threat ISIS poses to the West and how we must fight it.
Jay, we know that you're the head of the American Center for Law and Justice, so why write a book on Islamic terrorists?
We have an office in Jerusalem, so we've been heavily engaged in the whole Middle East issue for a long time. And about a year ago, we started looking at who are the other groups besides al-Qaeda. We knew al-Qaeda had been weakened, and we found ISIS. And what people need to understand is that ISIS is an offshoot. It was al-Qaeda in Iraq, AQI, but they were thrown out of al-Qaeda. Even for Osama bin Laden, they were too brutal.
Wow, how would you compare it to Hamas?
That's a great question. Number one, same ideology. The focus of Hamas is on Israel. With ISIS, it is more targeted, because of where they are, towards Christians, Yazidis, and other religious minorities, including Muslims that don't agree with them. And this is the real difference. Hamas, while they have funding and they have rockets, ISIS has billions of dollars, land, and 31,000 fighters.
We've heard the president outline a plan. Would they be a threat to the U.S.?
No doubt about it. This is the establishment of a caliphate. When Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, the caliph now, as he calls himself, was held captive in Iraq, he said as he was being released, and we put this in the book, he said, "I will see you guys in New York." They want to control the United States because they want the flag of jihad of ISIS over the White House.
What should our plan be to defeat ISIS?
Okay, there is no middle ground. And that means we're going to have to take whatever steps are necessary. And this idea of pulling things off the table, if we can't control them from the air, you're going to have to put boots on the ground. ISIS is a threat, as we say in the book, we can't ignore. It's not going to go away, and it's going to get stronger if we don't stop it now.
President Obama raised eyebrows when he declared the Islamic State and its actions are not Islamic. The president often says radical jihadists are not true followers of Islam. But a number of former Muslims, including one we talked to via Skype, say he's got it all wrong. In both his primetime speech to the nation and his UN speech to the world, President Obama defined Islam and the Islamic State as he sees them.
At the same time, we have reaffirmed again and again that the United States is not and never will be at war with Islam. Islam teaches peace.
ISIL is not Islamic. No religion condones the killing of innocents, and the vast majority of ISIL's victims have been Muslim.
It may not be the Islam President Obama wants, but some former Muslims say the religion and practices embraced by the Islamic State come straight from the Quran.
They are following Islam's Prophet Muhammad in every detail.
Brother Rashid is a former Muslim who grew up in Morocco. He hosts the television show Daring Question and gave this response to President Obama's claim.
I can tell you with confidence that ISIL speaks for Islam. Allow me to correct you, Mr. President. ISIL is a Muslim organization. Its name stands for Islamic State. So even the name suggests that it is an Islamic movement.
He quoted chapter and verse from the Quran.
You think that ISIL does not speak for Islam because they beheaded an American and they killed those whom they consider infidels. In fact, beheading is commanded in the Quran, in Surah 47, the 4th verse. It says, when you meet the unbelievers in fight, smite at their necks.
So this idea that what ISIS is doing is un-Islamic is not true at all. It's pure Islamic.
And former Muslim Noni Darwish says it all leads to the ultimate goal stated in the Quran.
The goals of the Islamic State is to empower itself to control the whole of the Middle East and expand to achieve the goals of Islam, of converting the whole world into one Islamic State, forcing Islam on the rest of the world.
Rashid adds that just because these radicals kill other Muslims, it does not make them un-Islamic.
You might ask, then why does ISIL kill other Muslims? The answer is that they consider them infidels, not Muslims.
Both Rashid and Darwish warn that political correctness masks the true danger of ISIL and puts the whole world at risk.
People have to wake up because the essence of our Judeo-Christian values and our way of life is at stake.
The truck exploded less than 30 yards from the embassy building entrance.
Up next, 30 years ago, terrorists attacked the U.S. Embassy in Beirut. How lessons learned from that day are still affecting Middle East policy today. Welcome back to Jerusalem Dateline. Some believe the U.S. should work with our enemies against ISIS. Others point out that history proves bad choices often lead to disaster in the Middle East. Case in point, the deadly terror attack against the U.S. Embassy in Lebanon 30 years ago. Here's Gary Lane with an important history lesson.
During the 1980s, Lebanese terrorists backed by Iran targeted the United States.
It was about 30 years ago I was here on assignment in Beirut, and we received word that the U.S. Embassy had been attacked in East Beirut by a suicide car bomber.
The truck exploded less than 30 yards from the embassy building entrance.
We rushed up to the location. When we got there, I'll never forget it. There was a bomb blast crater that was huge. Nearby, there were a couple of cars that were a wreck. They were still smoldering. Of course, the embassy had been damaged severely.
Thursday's attack on the U.S. Embassy in East Beirut may not be the last. The irony of this latest terrorist attack is that just 2 months ago, this embassy building was open here because it was believed to be safe.
The United States, of course, learned its lessons. It put Hezbollah and its allies on the terror list. Unfortunately, what is happening now is that there are a lot of pressures in town to reconsider, first of all, the backer of Hezbollah, that's Iran, and the other backer, that's the Assad regime, to reconsider them as potential partners, against ISIS. But that would be a very serious mistake if it's done.
Middle East analyst Walid Faris says that's because Hezbollah would take over Lebanon. Instead, he says the UN should pressure the group to abide by a resolution requiring it to disarm. And 30 years after the East Beirut bombing, Lebanon is dealing with yet another crisis. 1.5 million Syrians now live here as refugees. That's led to overwhelming humanitarian and economic pressures. But that's not all.
Unfortunately, within those refugee population, you have armed elements that are close to the Syrian regime and armed elements that are close to the jihadists of Syria. And we've seen many incidents over the past weeks and months whereby from within the refugee camps, the Syrian refugee camps, you see terrorists coming out.
The Lebanese army battled Islamic State fighters recently in the border town of Irsal. Faris expects ISIS to target northern Lebanon, including the city of Tripoli. He believes Hezbollah will gain more control over the country as it mobilizes the Lebanese, including some Christians, to oppose ISIS. Lebanese Christians are now arming themselves to avoid the same fate as believers in Syria and Iraq. But with complicated loyalties in the Middle East, who should they trust? Faris simply urges Christian factions to unite.
It's not a good idea for fighting ISIS to be the friend of Hezbollah and for fighting Hezbollah to be the friends of ISIS. Lebanese Christians should be united with other Lebanese against all jihadists of all kinds.
I know we looked at 30 years ago. What about 30 years from now? What will Lebanon look like?
It's going to depend a lot on what Washington will be doing in the next 5 to 6 years. If Washington continues with the same policy, I would see that the Christians in Lebanon will become a very small minority and controlled by either Hezbollah or ISIS, depending who's going to win.
Their future may depend on lessons learned from Lebanon's past. Washington choices affect Middle East power, and the results can have a lasting impact on America. Gary Lane, CBN News, Beirut.
It's been really this tense moment where my eyes have to be on Jesus. And every day, I can't look at who's saying what and who's doing what for Saeed. I just have to look at Jesus.
Up next, the waiting. Pastor Saeed Abedini's wife talks about his imprisonment, family sacrifice, and why he would say it's all been worth it. On September 26, American pastor Saeed Abedini marked a sad anniversary. 2 years in an Iranian prison because of his Christian faith. Christians around the globe have been praying and calling for his release. His wife, Nagme, has led the fight, but as she told CBN Charlene Aaron, the journey has been long and painful.
When Nagme Abedini married the love of her life, she never dreamed they would ever be apart.
I'd never dated before Saeed, and he was my everything. And I processed everything with him, my best friend.
Saeed Abedini, an Iranian-born pastor and U.S. citizen, is serving 8 years in one of Iran's worst prisons for doing nothing more than preaching the gospel of Jesus Christ. The Iranian government also calls him a national security threat for openly practicing his faith outside of their country. While in prison, Abedini has endured torture and threats from guards and fellow inmates. He has also suffered from internal bleeding and other health issues, but prison officials have denied him proper medical attention. Now, 2 years later, he faces yet another threat inside the prison walls from members of the terror group ISIS.
They've been beheading Christians all over Iraq and Syria. And here's someone who converted from Islam, and he's an American citizen, and so they want his life in that prison. So it's been really intense for him in that prison.
Saeed's parents can visit him once a week, but he has not been able to call his wife back home in the U.S.
My heart cries because it misses Daddy.
It's a painful reality for Nagme and the couple's 2 young children.
I pray that Dad come back home, but he's still not back home.
My son was 4 and my daughter was 5. My daughter just turned 8, so this was her 3rd birthday without him. But looking at them and realizing, especially when I heard the 8-year sentence, thinking they're going to be teenagers, and I never imagined. Just too painful to realize my kids will grow up without their dad, and it's been a painful journey. I've had a lot of emotional days.
My name is A버디니.
Nagme has turned that pain into a crusade for her husband's release. She has taken her case to both the United Nations and the U.S. Congress. She says at times she feels abandoned by her country.
There has been no efforts to get him out outside of a few statements here and there. I really do believe that Iran, if there's incentive, they will release him if someone's stern with him.
The UN recently issued a report on A버디니's case, in which it strongly condemned Iran and called for his release. First, Saeed and his wife felt bitterness against Iran. Now, Nagme prays for her husband's captors, and that God would use Saeed's story for his glory, even if that means she never sees him again.
It's been really this tense moment where my eyes have to be on Jesus, and every day, if I turn it to Iranian government and what they're saying or our government, I will fall. I can't look at who's saying what and who's doing what for Saeed. I just have to look at Jesus.
Because Saeed believes in forgiveness of sin through Jesus Christ.
One positive result of her journey, a unique platform to share the gospel.
You know, just all over the world, to sitting across from ambassadors to government officials, and each time telling them that Jesus is the answer.
It's a message Saeed also shares even while in chains. She says his letters tell of how he hugs those who persecute him and leads Muslims to Christ.
He's in the darkest place, and he's sharing Christ where they would never have a chance to hear about Christ if he wasn't there. You know, I've heard that some of the prisoners have said, I don't feel in prison anymore. I feel free because I found Christ.
She says while her heart aches for her husband's safe return, his story is strengthening the body of Christ around the world. More than 460 prayer vigils in 30 countries will mark this anniversary, with a specific focus on the persecuted church.
We're coming together and praying, and it's amazing. What our governments are doing, our government and the Iranian government, means nothing to me. My eyes are on the Lord, and that's where Saeed's deliverance will come from. And that's why this day of prayer is so important to me.
That's why Nagme says she will keep trusting and believing.
I had to take it to the Lord and say, I want my husband, but home soon now. But even if something happens to him, I'll be okay. You're a good God, like Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and saying, God will deliver me. But even if he doesn't, and I had to, sacrifice my Isaac and say, I give it to you. I give my future, my life to you. And whatever happens, I'm going to be okay.
She's confident that Saeed would agree.
Just knowing Saeed, that his chains are causing people to be saved, or I know that he would say it's worth it. If I die in this cell, it's worth it. And that's what keeps us going, is knowing that it's for Jesus. He paid the price for our sin, and he deserves our life.
Charlene Aaron, CBN News, Boise, Idaho.
Up next, Jews returning to the land of the Bible and fulfilling biblical prophecy. Much of the world might see Israel as a dangerous place, but the number of immigrants entering the country is at a 5-year high. We met with some of the last group to come to Israel before the end of the Jewish New Year. These immigrants came from one of the world's hotspots, Ukraine. When 19-year-old Alexandrina Zolodev saw her family safely on the ground in Israel, she couldn't stop crying.
When I saw them, I cried a lot. My mom cried too. It's really a happy day, but we're crying a lot.
Alexandrina immigrated here last year when Ukraine was still relatively quiet. Then the fighting began, catching her family in the middle of it.
When I lost contact with them, I was very worried because I didn't know what happened there. They called later and my dad told me that every day they were sleeping in the cellar. They ate there. There was no water, no electricity. There was nothing in the house.
Her family joined the last group of immigrants arriving at Ben Gurion Airport before the Jewish New Year. Nearly 25,000 Jewish people immigrated to Israel since the Rosh Hashanah holiday last year. Many of them came from war zones or places where anti-Semitism is on the rise.
For the first time, the biggest number of Jews who come to Israel is from France. We have a big increase from Russia and Ukraine.
Jewish Agency Chairman Natan Sharansky immigrated to Israel after spending years in a Soviet prison.
For me, it's especially exciting to see these families from Ukraine who are coming from the places where I grew. These places are destroyed now by the war. Ukrainians and Russians are shooting, firing from all types of weapons, and Jews are caught in the middle.
He said Christians play a big role in helping Jewish immigrants connect with his agency. When they do come, many arrive with little more than the clothes on their backs.
They come here without anything, without maybe 2 suitcases, that's all, because of bombing, and Israel is the country that can help them.
Sharansky says these immigrants are fulfilling Jewish prayers and Bible prophecy, in which God promises to bring his people back to the land.
Every of these Jews is closing the circle of thousands of years, at least 50 generations of his fathers and grandfathers and great-grandfathers. We're praying next year in Jerusalem. And here they are this day in Jerusalem.
The Zolodev family will settle in the Israeli community of Ra'anana, and Alex and Drina will soon join the IDF. Alex and Drina's dad arrived on his 41st birthday and says he has hope for the future, that his dreams will be fulfilled. It was quite touching to see this family reunited and to see prophecy unfold before our very eyes. Well, that's it for this edition. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time on Jerusalem Dateline.